bite-sized Bible, chronological edition. What is it? Bite-sized Bible in a year. Chronological edition for May 6th. I've only been saying it every day of the year. Why can't I remember it? All right, if you need to be reminded what we read, check the details down there. When we get to the end, I will ask you 3 things for you to think about. Pick one so that we can, say it with me, apply what we're reading to our lives. Okay. So, we're seeing the end of David's reign as king of Israel, and now his son Solomon is stepping in, and right off the bat, my attention was drawn to 1 Kings 2:2. David is talking to Solomon. He says, "I'm going where everyone on earth must someday go, death." That's not the part that caught my attention. This is, "Take courage and be a man." First of all, what? Be a man. But then he follows that up with, "Observe the requirements of the Lord your God and follow all his ways." That right there, I loved how those two went together, because to me, that is biblical manhood, is following the Lord wherever he's going to go and taking your people with you, leading your family to follow wherever it is that God has called you. And so, we can't let the world's view of what a man is taint the biblical view of what manhood is. And being a true man, being a real man, is being humble enough to submit to God's leadership and lead the people around you to do the same. Then, as we move on, we see David talking to Solomon, giving him his last words, which some of them were a little dicey. And then we see him die. We see a summary of his reign, and it ends with these accounts, and I'm in 1 Chronicles 29. "These accounts include the mighty deeds of his reign and everything that happened to him and to Israel and to all the surrounding kingdoms," saying that everything that he did is written in the records of Samuel, Nathan, and Gad. What a gift that everything that he did, well, maybe not the bad parts, but it's all written down. And for us, most of us don't get that. We don't get our good deeds written down. We don't do anything that people around us see worthy of writing a book about or writing a biography about, and that's okay, because that's not what we're here for. We're not here to be noticed. We're not here for people to look at us and go, "Oh my gosh, what an amazing life. I want to be just like her." No, we live for the God of the universe, and we live for his approval alone. And he approves us simply because he loves us and we are his. And we please him by having faith. Can't really write a whole book about that. I mean, I guess you could. But anyway, that's who we need to be living for. And that's why it's really fruitless to live for anyone else's approval or to do things in order to get noticed by the world around us. Because one day we're going to go where everybody must go. We're going to die. And there's probably not going to be a book written about us. But you know what? God sees everything. God knows everything. And our name is written in the most important book ever, which is the book of life that God has. And so that's where we need to keep our focus. Again, putting the blinders on to simply do what God calls us to do. And yes, that means loving people around us. But the motive is to love the Lord back with our life. You know, today we had an award ceremony at Cooper's school. And Cooper, my son, is amazing. And I don't just say that because I'm his mom. I mean, he's actually awesome. But he didn't win any awards because he does not care about school grades as much as some. And he didn't get any awards today. And you know what we did? When we got home, we drew a little award on a paper plate that said something about the award for caring about your friend's salvation. And then we took a picture of it and sent it to him, because that's what this world is about. It's about serving the Lord, loving him, and loving his people. And if his focus is on that, I'm happy. And so let's keep our eyes on what God has for us. Let's keep our eyes on God and living for him. All right, and then we get into the Psalms. And so we read quite a few Psalms, and I'm going to pick out one thing in each one that I thought was super interesting, because I feel like we look a lot to other things in our life to give us what our soul is yearning for, things like joy, things like peace and protection. And so in Psalm 4, in verse 4, it says, don't sin by letting anger control you. Think about it overnight and remain silent, so being slow to speak. Offer sacrifices in the right spirit and trust the Lord. He is the source of grace. He's the source of allowing us to experience enough grace in ourselves that we can then pour it out. Also, in verse 7, it says, you have given me greater joy than those who have abundant harvests of grain and new wine. He's the source of true joy. Any kind of joy or happiness we get from this world is temporary. Psalm 5, it says in verse 7, because of your unfailing love, which again, David is always focused on his unfailing love, I can enter your house. I will worship at your temple with deepest awe. Lead me in the right path, O Lord, or my enemies will conquer me. God is the source of guidance. He always knows which way to go. So let's ask him instead of asking everybody else around us, speaking to myself. Also in Psalm 5, yes, Psalm 5 verse 11, it says, spread your protection over them, that all who love your name may be filled with joy. Our source of true protection comes from the Lord. So we don't have to protect ourselves. We don't have to be overcome by trying to protect ourselves all the time from the scariness of the world, whether that's physical or emotional. Like, yes, be responsible. But we don't have to worry so much about protection because God is the source of our protection. Psalm 6, verses 8 and 9. Go away, all you who do evil, for the Lord has heard my weeping. The Lord has heard my plea. The Lord will answer my prayer. God is the source of comfort and of deliverance. It's that willful turning and focusing on God in the midst of a really hard time that allows us to be comforted, and when the deliverance comes, it comes from God. In Psalm 8, verses 4 and 5, what are mere mortals that you should think about them, human beings that you should care for them? Yet you made them only a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. You gave them charge over everything you made, putting all things under their authority. God is the true source, or the source of our true identity. What people tell us, what we think about ourselves, that's not really important. What's important is who God says we are. And it says here that we are a little lower than God and above the angels, and everything here on earth is under our authority because we are God's children. That gives us worth, right? And then in Psalm 9, verse 10, those who know your name trust in you. For you, O Lord, do not abandon those who search for you. He is the source of true belonging. We don't have to try to belong to all these different groups. People are good, but there are going to be seasons of loneliness. God is the source of our true belonging. We will always belong with the Lord. God says he will be found when we search for him, and that he will never leave us. So we always belong with him. He is our source of true belonging. And then in Psalm 11, verse 4, but the Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord still rules from heaven. He watches everyone closely, examining every person on earth. God is still on his throne. In this world of chaos, and if you're having a season of chaos, God is still on his throne, and he sees everything. And he is acting on your behalf even though you may not see it. So he is the source of our true confidence, and that peace that we get from being confident that God is who he says he is, and that he will do what he says he will do, and he loves us like he says he will. So, Q&E. Number 1, biblical manhood. Adjust your view of what manhood really is and start praying for that in your husband, in yourself, in your children if you have sons, and any man in your life. Start praying for that definition of biblical manhood, which is someone who follows the Lord and leads others to do the same. Number 2, pray for and live out of God's pleasure for you. Instead of trying to gain people's approval or even gain God's approval, because you already have it, start praying that you would accept that approval and start living out of that, like giving your life as a thanks offering instead of trying to gain approval. Or number 3, all those areas that I just talked about where God is the source of those things, pick one of those and start praying that you would start turning to him for that thing instead of turning to everything else. Just turning to God. Like, I'm sad lately, so I'm going to find my joy in God alone and start praying like, God, will you please help me to find your joy, find my joy in you alone. All right, that is it. May 7th is Psalms 12 through 17 and 19 through 21. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Bye-bye.